everyone. So today's woman of the Bible is Hagar. And I think most of us probably have heard of Hagar. So there's two ways to look at Hagar. Some people look at her as the beginning of the trouble. And some people realize that she was pretty much a victim of circumstances. She had very little control over her life. She was a slave. And I think we can, some of us can relate to her, as in there's areas in our lives that we don't have control over. There's nothing we can do about it. We're put in a situation in life that we have no say. We don't want to be there, but there's nothing we can do about it. And I think that's where Hagar was in her life. She was a slave to Sarah, and then Sarah asked her to be a surrogate mother for her, for Abram, and she had really no say over the matter. And we see that when she did conceive a son for Abraham, then she kind of got the big head maybe, and she kind of lorded it over Sarah. And I see sometimes as women we have this competition mentality. We have to be better than the other women in our life, or else we don't feel like we're worth anything. And maybe that's what happened with Hagar. She's finally like, okay, this is something that I am better at than you are, Sarah. And she took her one opportunity, the one thing that she was better at, and she just kind of ruined it for everybody with Sarah. And it made Sarah mad, which was kind of the wrong thing to do to her boss. But she did, and Sarah in return did not act very nice either, and took her the jealousy. It was a jealousy thing, and Sarah was the boss, so Sarah could do what she wanted, and she made it miserable for Hagar, and Hagar just couldn't stand it. So we see that this happened really fast. From the time that Hagar got pregnant, sometime in there, in that 9 months before she had her son, she ran away. She totally came to the end of her rope. She was done. She had it. She was done. She ran away. And you know what? At the end of her rope, she found God. I don't think she lived with Abraham and Sarah and didn't know a little bit about God. And I know God saw Hagar, because when Hagar was at the end of her rope, when she ran away, God came to her and said, listen, Hagar, I have a promise for you. And he gave her a promise and sent her back where she belonged. And he said, go back and make the best of it. And so she did. She went back. And I don't know if Sarah changed her attitude too, because for some reason for the next 16 years, they somehow made it work. I don't know the story there, but one thing, at the end of 16 years is what happened is that her son, Ishmael, started making fun of Isaac, Sarah's son. And Sarah snapped. Sarah had it. She says, I am done. I have fought and been made fun of with this slave woman. I'm done. Get out of here. Now we can look at that different ways. Did Hagar not change her attitude when she came back to Sarah the first time? Did her attitude rub off on Ishmael, and Ishmael had a better than thou attitude too? Or was it just simply a fun, making fun of type of thing, a harmless type of thing that Ishmael did? We don't know that. But we do know as mothers, our attitude rubs off on our children, and then can get our children in trouble because they are not as mature as we are. They can't handle attitudes quite as good as we do. We can't either, and a lot of times our attitude comes out in our children and then gets them in trouble. It's something we as moms need to watch. And we see that here at the end of 16 years that Sarah snapped and she said, I'm done with this, get out. And so Hagar and Ishmael was out running again. And she was out in the wilderness. And once again, Hagar is at the end of her rope. She don't know what to do. She thinks she's going to die. We know she must have been a good mom, because she simply could not bear to see her son die. She did everything she could for him, and then she just walked away because she couldn't handle it. And then when she was at the end of her rope, God showed up again. And God said, listen, Hagar, I gave you a promise. 16, 17 years ago, I gave you a promise that I was going to make a great nation out of your son, that you were going to be somebody worthwhile, and your son was going to be somebody important. I gave you a promise, Hagar. Why are you out here fussing and crying and whining for? And we know humanly she did have a very hard lot in life. She kind of had a reason to be out there fussing and moaning and groaning and having a pity party. But God didn't see it that way. He says, listen, I gave you a promise. And we see two things about Hagar. Number one, at the beginning, she was kind of like Sarah. I guess maybe she learned it from Sarah, of taking things into her own hands. God had given her a promise, but she could not stand the situation anymore, and she ran away. She's like, God's not going to move in my situation. I'm going to do something myself. I'm going to go do it myself. And we see that God showed up and told her to go back. This is not my promise. This is not how it's going to work. Sometimes we're like that when we're in hard situations that we don't want to be at. Our minds are constantly moving. How can I get out of this situation? And we need to remember God did give us tons of promises in the Bible. Even if God didn't come straight to us and give us a clear promise, there is tons of promises for us in the Bible that we need to wait on God. Psalms 135 says, I wait for the Lord, my soul doth wait, and in his word do I hope. In his word do I hope. We have the Bible to give us promise after promise. And we've got to remember that we've got to wait on God's timing, not ours. I think there's two things that I take from Hagar, is that my attitude will affect my children. Even if I think it's harmless, my children are watching me and they're picking things up from me. Number two is wait on God. When God gives you a promise, which he has in the Bible, God has given all of us promises. When God gives us a promise, wait. No matter how horrible your situation is, just hold on. God's got it. God's in control. God's got a reason and a plan. And if we take it into our own hands, we're going to mess it up. And sometimes we get a second chance when God says, go back. I'm not done. Go back. And sometimes we don't get a second chance and we totally mess things up. So take away from Hagar to wait on God's timing and to watch our attitudes. Love you, ladies.